Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So today, what are we going to do? We are going to talk about the Spiritborn, the new class, the beautiful Spiritborn, who also happens to kind of look like a woman, even if you choose the male. Dude, the female looks amazing. The male, I don't know what's going on with the male. It looks like a female in a woman's, like a female in a man's body. I don't know. I hate to say this, but it kind of looks like it kind of looks like a man, like a woman in man's clothing. It's even worse than the sorcerer. Like the sorcerer, I always made fun. The sorcerer looks like literally the guy from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I don't know. The male Spiritborn doesn't really look all that much better, to be perfectly honest. Looks pretty bad. Not really sure what they were going for with this character, but I digress. The female Spiritborn does look amazing, though. Let's talk about the Spiritborn and how the Spiritborn works. So first off, let's talk about the most important thing here, which I'm currently in the way for. In fact, I'm going to move myself over to the other side so that you guys can read these. Now, the Spirit Hall choices are very important to the way that your character functions. For one of many reasons. And it has to do with the items that you can potentially get access to, which will enhance the Spirit Hall choices in a myriad of ways. Now, your Spirit Hall choices come into number one is the Jaguar, which is every 15th a time you deal direct damage to an enemy. With a Jaguar skill, unleashes an additional strike, dealing 15% of the damage you have dealt to them in the last 0.5 seconds. All skills are now also Jaguar skills. Now, this is very important because when you are choosing these main Spirit Hall choices, you are not just choosing the effect that the Spirit Hall is giving you, you are also choosing the tag which you are then going to apply to all of your skills subsequently, which is very important. So once you choose the Jaguar, despite getting the active effect of the Jaguar, you are also going to tag all of your skills as Jaguar skills, which is going to be very useful for a lot of the items, and I'll go over some of those later. We're going to have more direct videos on the unique items, but I'm going to very briefly cover them in this video, talking about how they work and what you can potentially use them for. Now, the Eagle has casting an Eagle skill grants 4 seconds of Storm Feathers of movement speed bonus. When you evade, you fling up to 8 Storm Feathers for remaining damage, each dealing 125% lightning damage and making enemies vulnerable for 5 seconds. And also, all skills are now Eagle skills. The Gorilla, on the other hand, seems to be based around Thorns, which is casting a Gorilla skill deals 100% of your Thorns damage to enemies you hit, and also grants you a barrier for 5% of your maximum life, up to 30% for 3 seconds. All skills are now Gorilla skills. So, again, notice the theme here. We've got, obviously, the Jaguar makes all your skills Jaguar. The Eagle makes all your skills Eagle. The Gorilla seems to be based around Thorns and Barrier and is also going to make all your skills Gorilla. The Centipede, on the other hand, is hitting an enemy with Centipede skills, reduces their damage by 2.5% and slows them by 10% for 3 seconds, stacking up to a maximum of 8 times. All skills are now also Centipede skills. So you can also make all your skills Centipede skills by choosing this option as well, which has huge effects across the board. Now, this is just your primary. Your primary spirit is going to be one choice. Your secondary spirit is a whole nother choice, and that also can apply tags to your skills as well, depending on what helmet you're using. So, for instance, if you are using the Helm of Ebiwaka, which is what I'm using, so the Harmony of Ebiwaka, what the Harmony of Ebiwaka does is it makes it so that your secondary Spirit Hall choice also tags all your skills with the tag that those skills have. So, in the case of my character right now, you'll notice that I'm currently using the Payback skill. And the Payback skill is going to gain all of the tags of all of the choices that I am making for my Spirit Hall, right? So if I got to go out of town for this because sometimes it doesn't work unless I'm out of town. But you'll see that my Payback skill is now currently a Potency, Basic, Core, Gorilla, Jaguar, Eagle. It has 6 tags currently tied to it. Gorilla, Jaguar, Eagle. So it is a Gorilla skill by default, and because I have the Spirit Hall choices of Eagle and Jaguar, it is now a Jaguar and an Eagle skill as well, and attains those bonuses, which is very nice. So using the tag system in the way that the Spiritborn works can be extremely potent in terms of what you can get out of an ability. And you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of various ways that you can potentially use this to your advantage. For instance, in the skill tree, when you're looking around the skill tree through the panel, what you're going to see is that you have various things that only work with specific types of skills, right? So like this one in particular with the dominant is gorilla skills deal 5% times increased damage. Well, you can't get that unless it's a gorilla skill. So if you were using, say, a jaguar, an eagle, or a centipede skill, and you chose the gorilla as your primary spirit hall, you could get this benefit. The eagle skills gain multiplier for your movement speed. So they gain a 9% movement speed bonus, 9% times of your movement speed. I'm currently at 13.33, as you can see. And that would apply to any skill that is tagged as an eagle skill, right? So if I choose eagle as my primary, then all of my skills now become eagle skills. And even if I'm using something like Stinger, if it has the eagle tag next to it, then that means it also gains that benefit. There are also aspects, many aspects within the tree that also do similar things. Like, for instance, when you're looking through the aspect tree, you may find things like jaguar skills. So, for instance, the aspect of the plains power gives you a mystic circle that gives you a multiplier if you use a jaguar skill within it. Well, it doesn't have to be a jaguar skill, it just needs to be tagged as a jaguar skill. So, in other words, if you are utilizing this aspect and you have gorilla tagged as jaguar, then you can get the effect. But if you don't have your gorilla tagged as jaguar, then you're not going to. There's also other very interesting aspects, like, for instance, in the centipede tree. There's the aspect of infestation, which is lucky hit up to a 35% chance to spawn pestilent swarms, but only from centipede skills. So in this particular case, because I have my gorilla skill tagged as a centipede through the tree here, or no, I got jaguar. So I don't have it as centipede. So I would have to change this to centipede to get access to that, or I would have to wear the helm of Ebiwaka and change my secondary spirit to the centipede, one or the other. Now, the secondary spirits do have some really nice bonuses, like, for instance, you get maximum ferocity increased by 1 and gain a stack of ferocity whenever you kill an enemy. Ferocity specifically is a bonus that gives you attack speed. If you're ever wondering what that does, or if you forget what it does and you want to find out, all you really have to do is just hover over something that has ferocity in it. And then you can see right here, see it says ferocity. Ferocity increases your attack speed by 5% per stack. This effect stacks up to 4 times and can last up to 4 seconds, right? Well, this actually goes higher than this because you can stack your ferocity higher. So the higher your ferocity goes, the higher this bonus gets, right? And this means that if you can increase your ferocity through the Jaguar Spirit, well, then you're going to get an additional bonus there. You can also potentially go with the Eagle, which gives you critical strike chance, and also it's kind of like a stacking critical strike chance that resets when you crit. The Gorilla one is absolutely amazing. It gives you a maximum resolve increase, and it also makes it so that when your resolve is at least a certain amount, you're unstoppable. So you're like permanently unstoppable as long as you have resolve, which is actually really easy to obtain. The Centipede also offers a healing, but it's healing for maximum life for every nearby enemy that you've poisoned in the last 3 seconds. So you do have to constantly poison enemies to get access to this benefit. Now, there are ways that you can enhance the Spirit Hall choices. And there are 2 specific items as well as a tempering aspect, and I'm going to show you some of this real quick. One of them is called Loyalty's Mantle. And Loyalty's Mantle has the ability to enhance Spirit Hall bonuses rather dramatically, as well as a weapon called Washe Nakpa. The Washe Nakpa is I think it's a glaive. I can't remember. Do I not have a Washe Nakpa on this particular character? I have another character that has this already set up, so let's just go over to that one. And what I'm going to show you is how the Spirit Hall choices are enhanced through the bonuses that are gained from, say, the Washe Nakpa, the Loyalty's Mantle, the Tempering bonus. I believe there's also a Spirit Hall Tempering bonus, and you could potentially enhance these bonuses even further than what they normally are. So let's go to here, because these bonuses do not show up in town. It's important to note. My mustache is going up my nostril hairs over here.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
All right, so I have the Washe Knock Paw, which is a well, mine's only 95%, so it's not quite 100. It's a 95% bonus to the Spirit Hole choice. Then I'm also using the Loyalty's Mantle, and Loyalty's Mantle makes it so you get another 100% bonus if your Spirit Hole choices match. There is also, like I said, a tempering recipe, which can also enhance this as well, but I just wanted to show you what the Spirit Hole choices look like when you enhance them past their normal value. So for instance, with this one, it's not showing up properly because I do have to cast a Gorilla skill. So let's go ahead and cast a Gorilla skill, and there we go. So this is what it looks like when you enhance it to 295% of its normal value. As you can see here, casting a Gorilla skill deals 295% of your thorns to enemies you hit and grants a barrier for 14.7% of your maximum life up to a maximum of 88% for 3 seconds. A lot higher than what the original one did, which was, I believe, 5% up to 30% barrier and only 100% thorns. On top of this, you can see that my maximum resolve has now been increased by 4 stacks instead of only by 2. And on top of this, I also only need 3 stacks now to become unstoppable, which is very, very easy to obtain. In fact, I'm currently sitting at 12 stacks, which means I'm permanently unstoppable. If I change this to one of the other Spirit Hall choices, like for instance, we go to the Jaguar, and I match up my Spirit Hall choices, and then I use a Jaguar skill, which it doesn't really matter, but let's go ahead and use Ravager. And then I pull up my... It has not worked, because I probably need to attack the target. I believe for this one, it does have to be a native... A base skill? I think it has to be a base skill. For the Washe Knock Paw, sorry. Yes. So, I just need to very temporarily grab... Let's just grab Thrash for a second. That works just fine. Still no... Unfortunately, that is not the correct amount. Let's take this off, take this off. Unfortunately, sometimes with the tooltips, they don't display properly. I'm trying to see if I can fix this for the moment. Let's just go ahead and grab Rake for the moment. I think that will probably work. And it's still not working. I do have both of the choices. I really wish this was it was easier to display with the tooltips. So as you can see here, the base is 15%. That's 15% for 0.5 seconds. When I put on the Loyalty's Mantle, I go to 30% over 0.5 seconds, as well as we're also getting more minimum ferocity. So you can see the minimum ferocity changes from, or maximum ferocity changes from 1, and gain 1 stack of ferocity whenever you hit or kill an enemy, to we go to 2 when maximum ferocity, and 2 stacks of ferocity whenever we kill an enemy, up to 30% on that max. The Washe Knock Paw is a little bit more complicated. Let me see if swapping something simple like the ultimate might work. Just for the time being. The ultimate's pretty easy to use.
Not ready yet.
There we go. Okay, so now we have the Washe Knock Paw being activated too. So the way the Washe Knock Paw is it requires you to use a Jaguar skill within a certain time period, and it buffs up all these effects again. So as you can see, we're currently at 44% of the damage you have dealt to them within the last 0.5 seconds. So the Jaguar skill got a pretty huge bump to the amount that it's allowing you to translate into this attack, which is pretty neat. This one didn't seem to go up, though, which is interesting. Let's try that again.
Not ready yet.
So it doesn't look like this one goes up further than max of 2 stacks and 2 stacks of ferocity. And then further, you can go and you can take a look at any of these. So like if we take a look at the centipede, and we change both of our bonuses to the centipede, and then we just use a centipede skill, you can see we've got damage reduction by 5%, slows them for 20%. We also get 2% of our maximum life instead of 1%, up to 10%. So you can see like the spirit hole choices get a huge bonus essentially through this, and depending on what you're trying to achieve, you can definitely get some interesting effects. I've noticed that this one goes even higher. I think this goes up to 7.5%.
I need more time.
See if I can get this to go up. Unfortunately, the Washe Nakpa is not as easy to see happen, unfortunately. The tooltip problems in this game are very dramatic, in my opinion. And one of the biggest issues is that a lot of stuff doesn't show unless you are outside of town. And then on top of that, even if you are outside of town, sometimes those things require specific conditions to fulfill, and opening up the panel at the wrong time will show the previous condition, or opening up the panel at the right time will show the normal position. It's stupid. Another one that's very similar to that is the anti-venom. If you guys have been playing around with anti-venom, you may have noticed that it doesn't give you your resistances while you are in town. It does give you the resistances when you're out of town, though. So if you put your points in this, make sure you're walking out of town or going into the training hall so you can see the bonuses. So right now you can see that because we have the helmet, we're at 520. So let's cast our big boy. And there we go. So now we have the bonus of 7.4% damage reduction and 29% slow. To give you an idea of how much damage reduction that potentially is, let's multiply it, right? So 7... in fact, if I had a perfect one, it would be 8%, by the way, or 7.5%. So 7.5 would be a perfect loyalties mantle, times 8 total, which is a total of 60% damage reduction for the monsters. That's kind of crazy. And then on top of that, we also have the 29% slow, which we can multiply by 8 as well, which is like a 232% slow. I don't even know what the hell that would even do to a monster. And you can see that there's some very interesting things that you can do with the Spirit Hole choices. Not only can you utilize the Spirit Hole choices to your benefit through items like the Harmony of Ebiwaka, which will give you multiple tags, and those multiple tags will allow you to achieve multiple different options. The Harmony of Ebiwaka also gives you a very nice multiplier for every tag that's applied to the monster, which is a whole other thing. So getting access to a very nice Ebiwaka or a Loyalties Mantle can make huge changes to your character. In fact, one of the more interesting things that the Loyalties Mantle does is a 60% vigor and cooldown reduction of skills of the base type, which allow you to spam them with absolute impunity, which is amazing. As you can see here from my Devourer, without Loyalties Mantle on, my Devourer has a 48.2 second cooldown. However, with the Loyalties Mantle on and dual centipede choices, I'm currently at 21.23 seconds. The cooldown reduction that you get from something like this is insane, and allows you to spam things at an extremely fast rate. Let's go over to another character, and we're going to talk about some other things. So we'll take a look at the Green Ranger real quick. The Green Ranger is built around a Mythic Unique, which I was lucky enough to find. The Spiritborn pretty much is a Power Ranger, by the way. All right, so when you're talking about various classes and how you're going to have them built, depending on whether you're using like Ebiwaka or whether you're using Loyalties Mantle, there's also a lot of very interesting uniques in the game that can change the way that your character functions pretty drastically. First off, one of the most drastic changes comes from the... There's so many different weapons. Sepazontak which is a very powerful weapon. Sepazontak basically turns all of your basic skills into different versions of themselves, completely changing the way that those basic skills function. And it's kind of important to talk about the way that Sepazontak changes your character as a whole. In fact, if I go ahead and pull up some of my basic skills here, let's go ahead and just pull some points for the moment. Just so I can put one in each one of the basic skills, and so that way we can play around with them. So first off, when you take a look at the basic skills have essentially 3 attacks. They have the first 2 strikes, which are not really all that important, and the first 2 strikes usually just have a basic kind of appearance. The third strike always has a different appearance than the others, and that's because the third strike is a separate ability. Sepazontak changes the way that the third strike functions by giving it additional functionality. It doesn't just add to it the way that it states on the item, it also changes the way that they work almost entirely. So instead of having the third attack be 1 explosion, you'll notice that now we have 2 explosions that appear in front of us, and it changes the way that the rock splitter attack functions at all. Alright? On top of this, all of them do this. So if we take a look at the velocity skill, or the thunder spike skill, the thunder spike skill has essentially 3 attacks. It's got little jab, and then it's got big jab, right? The big jab has a special effect that could pull monsters in, or you could potentially use it to make enemies vulnerable. But when you put on this Sepazontak staff, it changes it into 3 big attacks, or 2 big attacks, and a triple big attack, which is a conal attack, which changes the way that it functions entirely. So making this into an entirely different skill than it was previously. Similarly, the Thrash ability also functions like this. So the Thrash ability has a tiny attack, and then it has this kind of like big attack that happens, which is like a whole bunch of strikes that happen in the air in front of you. When using the Sepazontak staff, you get 3 of those strikes in the air in front of you, and you get the 1 strike always happens on every single attack, completely changing the way that this ability functions. Withering Fist is likewise changed by this, and let's go ahead and pull up Withering Fist. So the normal Withering Fist is just simply strike, and then you get a little poison explosion. The poison explosion actually spreads poison to nearby monsters, so it's actually cooler than it looks here. But when you're using this Sepazontak, you get poison explosion, and then 3 poison explosions. So much stronger than it was before, which allows you to poison a larger area. And this is just one of the many items that can change the way that abilities function. So let's go take a look at some of my other characters. We're going to take a look at one which is using the Rod of Kepeleke. The Rod of Kepeleke is another very powerful item in this season. I think it's one of the most powerful items, to be perfectly honest. And it functions by changing the way that your core skills work, turning them into basic skills, and giving them additional functionality by charging them up to a stronger version of themselves. To give you an idea, let's go take a look at some of the core skills and how they function, and how this can potentially translate into making a character stronger. So for instance, right now you see I have full vigor. So this is when I'm going to get the biggest effect out of it using the Rod of Kepeleke. Let's change to something else just for the moment. So we're going to put on the Washe Nakpa, and I'm going to show you what my payback looks like normally. So this is my normal payback. And as you can see, it travels pretty far. It has a cooldown on it. I can't really use it very often, which is unfortunate. So it has like a 13.99 second cooldown, and I can't really use it as effectively as I would normally, right? Now, when you put on the Rod of Kepeleke, the Rod of Kepeleke makes some changes to the way that the ability works. It changes all core skills into basic skills so that they're free to cast, and this means that you don't require any vigor to cast them. So if you cast them, you basically can cast them for free even if you are sitting at 0 vigor. Now, with this particular ability, Payback consumes all of my Vigor anyway, but you can see that despite the fact that I've consumed all my Vigor, I can now spam the ability. I don't have to worry about whether I have Vigor or not, and it makes it much easier to fire off Payback. However, when I am at full resource, which I can show you that as well. So when I am at full resource, Kapeleke changes the way that Payback works and turns it into a much bigger version of itself, which you can clearly see here. And the difference between the big and the small version of the attacks is pretty huge. Not only does it increase the size of the ability, but it also increases the damage of the ability as well. And practically all of the core skills do this. So it doesn't matter which of the core skills that you're utilizing, whether you're utilizing Payback that's turned into a core skill through the Poised Payback ability, or you're utilizing Stinger, Rake, Quill Volley, Crushing Hand, or Touch of Death, which also has an option to turn it into a core skill. Basically, what this does is it charges up the ability. It uses it in its biggest form, making it into a much larger ability than what it normally is. And you can see this in pretty much any of them. So, like, if I pull points from Poised Payback for a minute, and we put points into Stinger as an example. So let's put points into Stinger, and then we cast Stinger at full power. You see the rather huge difference between Stinger at full power and Stinger at its smallest output. So if I cast it over here without getting any damage to the target nearby, you see it has a very small output. It doesn't seem to consume as much space, right? However, when you cast it on the target and you get your full Vigor, that's the most important thing, you notice that we get the much larger version of it, which does much more damage. And all of them do this. So let's take a look at all of them real quick and we'll get a idea. So let's go to Rake. So as you can see, Rake is a rather small ability, normally, right? However, when I'm attacking with full mana, or full Vigor rather, it's a rather large ability that covers like the majority of the screen. And let's go take a look at Quill Volley as well. So Quill Volley, when used at minimum resource, and Quill Volley when used at maximum resource. Not much of a difference, actually. And then finally, we have Crushing Hand. So let's take a look at Crushing Hand. Now, this one doesn't really do Crushing Hand justice because there is a aspect that causes Crushing Hand to hit 10 times within rapid succession. But as you can clearly see here, it's very small explosions. And with the Rod of Kapeleke, transforms it into very large explosions. So a pretty huge difference between what it was and what it is when utilizing the Rod of Kapeleke. And there's so many different transformative ways that you can affect abilities on the Spiritborn that it opens up so many different possibilities for you to create fun and exciting builds. I've been playing around with a lot of them. Let's talk for a second about the passives. So the key passives. So these are like one of the most important things that you're going to choose for your character in the end. And when I originally saw these, I was kind of like let down by them. I didn't think they were the greatest, but now I'm kind of like sold on quite a few of them. And I think that Prodigy's Tempo might actually be the strongest one out of the lot. But we're going to talk about them for a second. So first off is Vital Strikes. Let's go over Vital Strikes first. Vital Strikes is a huge multiplier 45 times to vulnerable enemies, but after you make an enemy vulnerable, your next damage attempt is going to heal you for 2% of your life, generate 5 Vigor, but it also removes the vulnerable effect from the monster. So with this, you're generally going to want a build that can apply vulnerable with practically every single attack. What this is built around and what it's kind of designed for is Eagle skills. Pretty much all Eagle skills, for the most part, have some way to make enemies vulnerable, and there's a lot of them. So when you're dealing with Eagle skills, the entire general idea of this is that you're making the enemies vulnerable with every single attack that you have, so you're going to get 45% multiplier for every single attack that you have. This one's not going to work very well for a character that cannot make the enemies vulnerable with every single strike. And this is unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Sting can do it. For instance, right here, you can make enemies vulnerable while you're healthy. You can also make enemies vulnerable with Enhanced Quill Volley. There's also a passive here with the pole arms. Lucky hit, 30% chance to make enemies vulnerable, which could also come in handy for this particular kind of passive. The generating 5 vigor also comes in handy if you're trying to spam core skills without utilizing the Rod of Kepeleke or one of like the Midnight Hunt Ring or something like that. It can be useful to like bridge the gap on the generation of vigor on some of those abilities. I'm actually using it currently on Sting to bridge the gap on Sting. The next one is the adaptive stances. Now, the adaptive stances gives you different benefits depending on what base spirit skill you cast. Now, this has to do specifically with the base of the skill, not the tags that we talked about earlier, and it gives you very specific bonuses. The Eagle gives 30% movement speed, which through the brilliance here actually does translate out into multiplier. The Gorilla gives 30% damage reduction, which is a pretty hefty amount of damage reduction. The Jaguar gives 30% increased attack speed. The Centipede gives 3% life per second. And then on top of that, you also get a bonus to your core stats. So this is something that you will see on the actual panel as you're attacking. So when you use the abilities, you'll notice that your core stats goes up. You see I have 2,578 dexterity. And if I let it fall off, I have 1,718 dexterity. Now that translates out to my current setup, which is what, 214% increased skill damage to 322% skill damage. So as you can see, I get a pretty large bonus in my increased amount of skill damage through this particular passive. So the way that this one is giving you an increase in damage is by specifically increasing your core stat, which is giving you a bonus through that. Now, this obviously is a percentage bonus, which means that the more core stat you have, the greater the bonus that you're going to get from this, which is going to increase, obviously, the amount of damage that you're doing almost exponentially, depending on how much core stat you're able to achieve. In fact, if you do choose this one, you're probably going to want to stack as much core stat as you possibly can, and maybe even above other things, specifically because you're getting a 50% bonus to it, and every percentage point that you can get more is just more bonus that this one is going to give you. You know, for instance, if you had, as an example, if you had, say, 5,000 core stat and you add 50% to that, that's 2,500 additional core stat that you're adding, right? So that brings you up to 7,500 core stat. And depending on how high you can raise that core stat, you're going to get a rather large amount of multiplier from it. Next is the Prodigy's Tempo. And hold on, before we do that, let me actually show you what the icon looks on the bar. So when you use a Gorilla skill, you're going to get this one right here, which shows you damage reduction. When you use an Eagle skill, you're going to get this one, which shows you the movement speed. When you use a Jaguar skill, you're going to get the Jaguar icon, and so forth and so on. And the Centipede one has its own icon as well. So you can clearly see that you have those things active when you activate them through the adaptive stances. Next is Prodigy's Tempo. Prodigy's Tempo is one that I originally thought wasn't really the greatest. However, I really kind of come around to this one, and it has to do with the fact that it reduces the cooldown of all of your skills so very nicely. So let me go ahead and trigger all of my skills real quick. And I'm going to show you how this one works. You see my skills constantly going down, and I managed to reset all my skills in a rather short period of time, right?
Not ready yet.
This is because every third cast that you get of a core skill causes a reduction in cooldown of all of your cooldowns at that particular moment. And the way that Prodigy's Tempo is working is it's rewarding you for spamming specific abilities. In this particular case, when it comes to your every third consecutive cast of the same basic skill, increases all purchased skill ranks by 2. So basically, you get 2 additional bonus points in all of your skills. So instead of Payback being, say, level 5, now Payback is level 7. And that just simply comes from spamming the ability, right? In this particular case, you're getting +2 to every single skill rank that you have for the duration of that effect. Then, for abilities like the second part, which is every third cast of the same core or potency skill, reduces all skills active cooldown by 10%, increased by 2% for each of the skill ranks that you currently have active. Now, what this means is that if you increase the level of payback to an extremely high value, like for instance, let's say you increased payback to, I don't know, like level 20, which is possible, you're going to get a 2% for each rank. So that's basically about 40% increase, right? So you take your 20 and you multiply that by 2. So you get 40% plus the original 10% that's on the effect, which means that you're getting a 50% reduction every third cast that you cast a core or potency skill, which is actually kind of insane and allows you to basically spam cast abilities at a very extremely fast rate. As you can clearly see here, it doesn't really take very much for me to reset every single ability on my tree. Whereas normally, if I were to let that happen on its own, it would take a pretty prolonged period of time, waiting obviously for the 23, 43, or whatever seconds that's required for all of those skills to reset naturally. This is a really effective and very fast way that you can add in additional uses of a skill, cooldowns, or any other thing just by simply spamming core or potency skills. And there's a lot of way to spam core and potency skills in the current version of the game. You can use Rod of Kepeleke, which turns them into basic skills, and then you get both effects at the same time. Obviously, you can also use Loyalty's Mantle to reduce the cost of core skills to the point where they basically are like minimal, like bare minimal in the amount of cost that they actually use, so that you can just simply spam them as a natural ability. And I've done that as well for things like Sting on my poison character. He's not using Prodigy's or Rod of Kepeleke, but he is using Prodigy's Tempo to reset all his abilities because he can spam Sting as fast as he possibly wants to, and he doesn't even need to use Rod of Kepeleke to do that. And this means that he gets the every third consecutive cast of the same skill, you get the 10% reduction of all of his abilities. Now, the last one is Noxious Resonance. Now, Noxious Resonance is one that I should probably show off on my poison character. So let's go over to my poison character. Noxious Resonance has to do with the ability to cause all poison damage to basically explode on the target. Ooh. And my current character is kind of set up so that I'm not using that. And it has to do with the fact that I'm using Shattered Vow, which wants the targets to be poisoned. The more poisoning they have, the better in this particular regard. However, if you were to set up for Noxious Resonance, what you would be doing is you would be setting up to pull the poison off the target. And by pulling the poison off the target, you're going to cause this big explosion to happen, and it has to do with critical strikes. So it's kind of like an interesting analog to Gushing Wounds on the Barbarian, which kind of worked similarly by going off your critical strike chance and allowing you to get a multiplier to your poison damage through the use of your making the target bleed. So you make the targets bleed, you critical strike them, it causes a huge explosion, it kind of like dishes out more damage through your crits. They're kind of trying to give a way for the poison character to have access to this. And as you can see, I'm using Prodigy's Tempo on this character too. But let's go ahead and pull this, and we'll pull on Noxious Resonance. So Noxious Resonance is your critical strikes cause your poisoning on an enemy to burst, dealing 100% of the total poisoning instantly to them and 20% of it to surrounding enemies before removing the poison effect from the primary target. Damage is increased by 30% times of your critical strike damage bonus, and as you can see, I'm currently at 49% times. So if we choose that, when we're attacking the target with our poisoning abilities, we can occasionally cause them to explode, essentially, for more poison damage to all of the characters. So let's get multiple training dummies.
I need more vigor. I need more time.
Oh, I'm missing my touch of death because I changed it earlier.
I'm low on vigor.
Unfortunately, I'm running out of vigor. But this particular build it's a very specific key passive. It does not work, and it's not really going to be useful for anybody that's not poisoning damage on targets. So you're going to have relatively high poisoning damage to utilize this, and you're also going to need relatively high crit and critical strike damage bonus. You could utilize this very well with an Andariel's Visage. You could utilize it very well with a poison damage setup on this particular character. I would not recommend using it with Shattered Vow, however, because Shattered Vow wants you to poison the damn monsters, and the more poisoning damage they have, the better it works. So, unfortunately, they're just kind of incompatible with each other because one is pulling the poison off the target and making them explode, where the other one is wanting them to stay poisoned for a relatively long period of time. The removing of the poison effect is really the only thing that kind of separates the two, which is silly. There are tons of poison abilities on the Spiritborn. You have access to the Devourer, which causes lots of poison damage. The Touch of Death, which is a really high poison damage ability. Scourge does high poison damage. Toxic Skin does poison damage. It also kind of has like a blaze effect behind it, for those of you from Diablo 2, where you like run and it makes like a poo pile behind you. It's actually really disgusting. Stinger is really nice poison damage as well, although it does also have a poison removal, which I would probably say that the Rampant Stinger, I don't know if it would work necessarily with this, because this is also removing the poison, and this is also removing the poison from targets, so I'm not exactly sure how well they would function together. And then, of course, you've got Withering Fist, which can poison all nearby enemies that are not poisoned, which is kind of fun. There's also an entire Pestilent Swarm mechanic within the game, which is basically kind of like little mini Hammerden things. And basically every single time that you use an ability, you get these like little Pestilent Swarms. They either shoot out straight or spin around you, depending on how you set them up. And there's a lot of fun ways that you can potentially set up the Pestilent Swarms. I've come up with some pretty neat ideas in terms of how to utilize these guys, and I mean, so far this poison character, although not properly scaled, is easily I think World Tier 3 capable right now, and she needs a lot of work. She needs much mo beta equipment, and she also needs far much increased glyphs as well. She's currently only running like below level 46 glyphs. Each one of her glyphs are, what, 33, 31, 29, 27, 27. As she increases and she gets stronger and stronger in a character, she can obviously dish out more damage. There's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of things in the Paragon tree as well, and this is important for a lot of people to note. One of the most powerful glyphs right now is the Colossal Glyph, which gives a 2% multiplier for every Resolve stack, and you can stack Resolve on essentially all of your equipments, as well as using the Spirit Hole choice to get maximum Resolve. There's a lot of different ways that you can potentially take advantage of this, and a 2% multiplier for every Resolve stack is a lot of damage. There's also a 2% multiplier for every Pestilent Swarm and Touch of Death Swarm that you have on the battlefield at any given time, which is another way that you can stack damage with this particular build. In general, the interesting thing about the Spiritborn, and also kind of like a negative thing to talk about, is that a lot of the power for the builds doesn't really come from the builds themselves. I hate to say this, but a lot of the multipliers and power that actually creates a powerful Spiritborn build actually is coming from generic sources, like Resolve multipliers, Pestilent Swarm multipliers, armor bonuses from the unyielding hits, block critical strike damage bonuses from the aspect of Reprisal. And in general, like, I think you're going to find that a lot of your power on the Spiritborn translates to other characters. So you can very easily take those generic multipliers, like the Resolve bonus, apply them to just about any character, by the way, and get some pretty good damage output from it. Resolve also gives you a damage reduction, and if you take the passive in the skill tree, which is right here. Perseverance also gives you a 0.5% additional damage reduction per stack of Resolve, which does go up to 1.5%, 2% if you're using the new Shroud of Death armor, which gives you +1 to all passives. And you can get about 1.5% damage reduction for every stack of Resolve. There's also a tempering recipe that is a defensive tempering recipe, by the way, which actually is probably one of the most offensive tempering recipes in the game. This may or may not be fixed eventually, but it essentially gives you a maximum resolve stack. You can see it right here. It's +1 to 2 maximum resolve, and putting that on your equipment is obviously going to increase your damage output for every stack of resolve that you have. You can build resolve in many different ways, and you can also build ferocity in many different ways. And talking about ferocity and resolve for a second, there are a lot of various options. First off, Armored Hide is probably the most simple. Activating Armored Hide grants you maximum resolve immediately. So as soon as you activate Armored Hide, you get maximum resolve stacks. You can also get maximum resolve stacks or ferocity stacks through the Hunter, which is Harmonious Hunter. The Hunter overfills your ferocity by 4 and causes you to deal 100% times increased damage to injured enemies for 8 seconds. There are tons of abilities that give ferocity naturally, though. Like, for instance, you can get ferocity through the Sharp Thrash on Thrash. You can get Resolve through the Sharp Rock Splitter on Rock Splitter. You can also stack damage with Resolve through Crushing Hand, as you can see here. There's an additional multiplier on Crushing Hand for Resolve. There are also benefits to having ferocity at high values. Like, for instance, not only do you have a multiplier for Resolve, but there is also a multiplier for ferocity, which is this one right here. It's the Mystic Circle Jaguar skill, which is 5.3% multiplier per point of ferocity that you have access to, giving you a pretty high amount of additional damage. This actually goes a hell of a lot higher than this too if you throw it on a weapon and you get like a lot of the Mystic Circle potency bonuses. The Mystic Circle potency bonuses will increase this percentage even higher, giving you more multipliers from each stack of ferocity that you have access to. Ferocity can also be very useful for other reasons, as well as Resolve can be very useful for other reasons. Just simply one look in here, and if you type in ferocity, you'll find a slew of aspects that have to do with ferocity. Like, for instance, the Duelist aspect adds more stacks. You can also make it so that every time you hit a vulnerable enemy, you have a 35% chance to reduce your evade cooldown, and each stack of ferocity that you have increases this chance by 3%. So you can get, say, like 12 or 15 stacks of ferocity pretty easily, and then 15 times 3, so you're looking at, what is that, like 45% plus the 35%. So 40, 50, 60, 70, that's like 80% chance to reduce your evade cooldown by 5 seconds every single time you attack an enemy if you have high ferocity. This one in particular gives you a chance of getting ferocity every time you crowd control an enemy, which is really good for the Centipede, by the way, because the Centipede is crowd controlling everything all the time. There's the aspect of the Plains Power in its base form with a 4.1%. And then we've also got the aspect of Endurance, which is your Resolve has a 3% chance, or a 6% chance to not be lost for each stack of ferocity that you have access to. So that one's actually kind of interesting in terms of trying to keep your Resolve high by also keeping your ferocity high. But then if you go on the other side of the equation and you look at the Resolve side, the Resolve side, of course, has things like gain 15% block chance per Resolve stack, which can very easily set you at 100% block chance. Losing a stack of Resolve has a 10% chance to heal you for 10% of your maximum life, or 11% of your maximum life, which is pretty neat. You lose a Resolve stack essentially every single time you take damage. Any damage of any type, essentially, you lose a Resolve stack. So it does represent a very interesting heal, although a 10% chance isn't the most amazing. Kinetic Suppression is casting a non-mobility skill, grants you 8 Resolve and causes your next concussive stomp to strike in a circle around you. And then we also have Resolve. You gain Resolve for each 10 Vigor you gain over 100, so this is really good for basic builds because it allows you to have a very easy way to spam Resolve on your character as much as you possibly want. And then there's Potent Exchange, which is gain 1 Resolve when you dodge an attack. Your potency skills consume 2 Resolve to deal 55% increased damage, which is actually really powerful. So as you can see, the Ferocity and the Resolve system systems are kind of tied into the way that the Spiritborn works rather intrinsically. One of them giving you very nice offensive capability through the increased attack speed that it offers, which is 25% increased attack speed per stack. The other one offering you very nice amounts of damage reduction, which is a 20% damage reduction for having any stack of Resolve, and then an additional 1.5% damage reduction if you take this passive per stack of Resolve that you have access to. You can also, of course, gain damage output through Resolve and through Ferocity by utilizing the specific aspects or the specific glyphs. The aspect of the Plains Power giving you a multiplier for your Ferocity, and the glyph of the Colossal, giving you a huge bonus to your multiplier through the Resolve stacks. And your Resolve stacks can get really high. If you think about it from a perspective, you can have 2, 4, I believe it's 6, 8, and then you can also enhance those with masterworking, getting them even higher. And I think that at least brings them up to 3. So that's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can also get more Resolve stacks, obviously, if you choose the Spirit Hole bonus. And you can even increase that Spirit Hole bonus even further, too, depending on what kind of pieces of equipment you're using. So you can potentially get a rather large amount of Resolve. I think I've heard up to 60 is what I've heard so far. Like absolutely perfectly masterworked, optimal equipment, 60% or 60 stacks and 60 stacks times 2. So that's a 120 times multiplier through the Resolve stacking with the Colossal Glyph. And then you can, of course, also stack Ferocity and maybe even the Plains Power bonus. You can stack all sorts of very interesting things. The coolest thing about the Resolve ones is that they're technically defensive, not offensive. And you're also gaining offensive power through them, so you gain your defensive and offensive bonus at the same time through the Resolve stacking, which is very, very powerful. I do have a couple characters who are using, obviously, maximum amounts of Resolve, but these are currently not. But you can see at least I have it on my amulet with +2 Resolve stacks. Taking things even further, let's take a look at the tree, and we'll talk about some of the actual choices here. So one thing to know about the Paragon board is that as a Dex user, you're going to have a lot of problems with armor, and you're going to have a lot of problems with resistances, and so you're probably going to want to take the armor nodes whenever you see them. And you're also probably going to want to take the resistance nodes whenever you see them as well, and it's going to help you drastically in terms of making your character stronger. Health nodes are also very important, so make sure you don't ignore those, because you can end up with really low health at the end if you're not careful. 2,000 health is not acceptable. Let me put it that way. If you're a level 60 character and you're in like World Tier 4, 2,000 health is not acceptable. You're going to die a lot. The boards themselves, so let's go over the boards. Viscous Shield is absolutely amazing. It's very easy to generate barrier on the Spiritborn. There are a lot of various ways to generate barrier. You can do so through the Gorilla Spirit Hole choice. You can do so through the Viscous. There's a, what is it called? Skill tree bonus. It's called Auspicious, which gives you barrier. You can also get barrier through things like the Que rune, which is a rune that just simply gives you barrier for utilizing it. I don't think I have it on this particular character because this character does not need it. But the Que rune gives you Earthen Bulwark, and I'm pretty sure I have that here somewhere. Earthen Bulwark can definitely be used as a way to generate barrier that way. You can also generate barrier through various other means, like, for instance, healing yourself through Temerity, through the Centipede skills, which there are a lot of ways to heal yourself through the Centipede skills. And overall, it shouldn't be impossible for you to obtain some way to build barrier. So the Viscous board, this board right here, the Viscous Shield board, is absolutely amazing for the Spiritborn, and it's probably going to be one that's in pretty much every single build that you make. Next is the Sapping board, and the Sapping board is also pretty amazing. All it really requires you to do is cast a skill 3 times in a row. So when you cast any skill 3 times in a row of the same type, so Gorilla, Jaguar, Eagle, or Centipede, You get a really nice spirit restoration of 15%, and you also get 30% damage increase as well. And I think pretty much everybody's taking this board as well. I don't really see any reason not to. Then we have the revealing board. Now, the revealing board is more based around damage reduction, or sorry, damage to monsters that are crowd controlled. So it does give you a 30% chance to knock down any enemy that is vulnerable, which is really nice for crowd controlling bosses and staggering them. Because if they're vulnerable, it also applies the knockdown, and the knockdown applies a really nice amount of stagger to their bar, which can help you stagger bosses fast. But unfortunately, the 30% times increased damage to crowd controlled enemies doesn't apply to bosses unless they are in the staggered state. So this may be one that you may want to pass on, depending on what you're doing. But it does have some pretty nice nodes in it, and I don't have enough points to put into everything, but I would certainly like to. Then we have the Infighter board, which is when you dodge or block an attack, you gain 2% increased attack speed and 1% increased damage for 5 seconds, stacking up to 9 times. This one is very nice. Honestly, I have pretty much taken this on just about every Spiritborn so far. It is so easy to get dodge, and it is so easy to get block. You are a dex-based character, and every single dex point you have stacks dodge chance. There are multiple skills that stack dodge chance to give active bonuses to dodge chance. There are multiple skills that give block chance and stack active bonuses on dodge percentage, as well as dodge damage reduction, like, for instance, Armored Hide, as well as passives that gain you dodge and block chance. So honestly, there's no reason not to take this one, because as long as there's something trying to beat the crap out of you, you're going to get these bonuses. And it's a very, very powerful board in general. Then we have, let's see here. I know we can't add another board unless I am taking these away. So the last couple boards are, I really don't want to destroy my character here. Let's go destroy a character that probably needs to be redone anyway, because she's very far behind in the Paragon points, and she needs to update her Paragon board anyway. This one, I think she's like almost 60 or so points behind, or 70. I can't remember. It's a lot of points. Yes, 68 points behind. So I can definitely play around with her boards here. She's actually utilizing a couple boards that the other ones aren't. So first off is the Spiny Skin board, which is when you use a cooldown, you gain 20% thorns for 5 seconds. So this one is going to be very specific to you thorns builders who are, utilizing, say, the gorilla stuff to apply their thorns to multiple targets. And this one's going to be really useful if you are doing thorns, but it's also going to be useless to you if you're not doing thorns. So this is one of those boards that's either take or skip. And for most people, it's going to be a skip because you're not doing the thorns builds. Let's go ahead and pull up the other boards that are missing. So the Bitter Medicine board, this is one that I haven't really spent a lot of time with using. I played around with it on my Poison character because my Poison character has a lot of healing received bonuses. And I didn't really think it was the most amazing thing. I could imagine that if you set up a character specifically for getting as much healing bonus as you could, maybe using Temerity for the infinite barrier essentially, and this could be interesting. I didn't really think it was the most amazing thing when I tried it out, but I also wasn't building specifically for it. I was just a centipede, and I thought that maybe because I'm a centipede and I'm healing myself constantly that I could get good usefulness out of it, but I really couldn't. So this one might be a skip unless you're setting up specifically for it. Drive. Drive is one that was kind of specifically designed around the eagle. So it has to do with after moving 10 meters, you deal 3% increased damage for 10 seconds, and this effect can stack up to 10 times. Moving 10 meters is pretty easy with the Spiritborn because you're dashing around all the time anyway, evading all the time, running all over the place. You have tons of movement speed. It's actually pretty easy to get this bonus, and if you're doing any kind of dashing or running or building of movement speed, if you're an eagle character, this one's a really good one to take for certain builds. I do find that it's a little bit less useful in boss rooms, unfortunately, because the boss rooms aren't really very big, and you're not always moving around a whole lot when you're fighting the boss because you kind of want to sit there and do your damage rotation. But if you have the presence of mind to remember, like, hey, I have this bonus, I need to run around a little bit to get my my stacking movement speed, then you'll be okay. And you can get that multiplier as well. This one's really good for anyone that's moving around a lot, especially those evasion builds, which are crazy. Convergence, I think that's the last one. Convergence is the only one that's kind of weird. It says you deal damage equal to 20% times of your two highest bonus damage types combined, up to 30%. Now, it doesn't have any tooltip to tell you whether or not you're actually getting a bonus. So if I just go ahead really quickly and just attach this board for the time being, and let's just go over here and we'll put points into it. Now, normally on these, they have a tooltip, and they'll tell you like whether or not you've successfully like done this and how much the percentage is. Like for instance, trying to think here, the bitter medicine one shows. So like when you put the bitter medicine one in, it tells you what the multiplier is. In fact, most of the characters have stuff like this. This one in particular doesn't tell you. I'm assuming that it has to do with things like poison damage or like like damage bonus for ice or fire or lightning or whatever, and it's going to take two of your highest bonuses, add them up, and then it's going to turn them into a multiplier. But it sounds really good in theory, your practice, but if I could just see what my multiplier is and know what I'm getting, that would be great. I feel like sometimes you take this and it's absolutely useless because you don't have enough bonus to actually take advantage of. Like maybe you're not stacking any specific bonus that's utilizing. It also doesn't necessarily explain what bonuses are counted in the total and which ones aren't. Is it only counting fire, lightning, ice, like shadow, poison? Or are we also counting physical? At which point is it also counting things like critical strike damage? Is it counting overpower damage and so forth and so on? So like if I'm stacking, say, crit and overpower, is it going to take those two and add them together? Or is it only going to add things together like fire and lightning? Or, like physical and fire or things like that. This one in particular, I've kind of been avoiding because I'm not entirely sure if it's actually doing anything at all. Although when I am stacking a particular type of damage, like poison, for instance, I feel like that one in particular it might be useful for, or like fire or lightning. I don't know. And then you have the entire rune system. So the entire rune system has been really fun to play around with on the Spiritborn and playing around with all the different rune combinations that you can potentially like utilize. For instance, obviously, you don't have to have a skill on your bar. You could use, say, like the Cry rune, which the Cry rune allows you to use the Spiritborn's Vortex. And every time you do a certain amount of damage or fulfill the condition, you get a free Vortex pull in, which is really fun. You can also utilize things like I taught earlier, like the Earthen Bulwark to get your barrier, which can fulfill the conditions of the Viscous Paragon board. You can also utilize these to increase your damage or to allow you to perform additional effects. I've been using the Lum rune a lot this season, which is the one that allows you to generate resource depending on like how you fulfill the condition. And overflowing it can give you even more back, which can make it relatively easy to maintain a full bar. All in all, I think that the Spiritborn is an absolutely amazingly fun class. I have already played around with and messed, like theory crafted tons of characters, payback builds, stinger builds, freaking like basic builds, Sepizontac builds. I've also played around with thorns to try and see how far I could push that. And the best thing I can tell you is that every build seems to be viable. It's really just a matter of utilizing the generic multipliers that are present in just about every class. So if you aren't using those generic multipliers, you're probably not going to push the build very far. And what are those generic multipliers? Going over them again. Generic multiplier number one is the ferocity stacks. The ferocity stacks through the Mystic Circle, if you want to utilize that one. That one is not as popular, but it does allow you to add a stacking multiplier, which can apply for every stack of ferocity, which also gives you attack speed, which is actually a really powerful one. The second multiplier is the armor stacking, which is not as powerful now because it seems like the other ones have been working even better. But it is this one right here, the aspect of unyielding hits. Casting a gorilla skill increases your weapon damage by up to 30% of your armor for 3 seconds, maximum 1500 weapon damage bonus. So this one has been very powerful this season as well because you can stack your armor to really high heights, and then by stacking your armor, you can get a huge amount of additional damage added to all of your attacks, which is going to make your character much stronger. Another very powerful one is the block aspect. This is another generic one that you can utilize, which is the aspect of redirected force. This one gives you a critical strike damage bonus equal to 70% times of your block chance. Blocking doubles this bonus for 10 seconds, which basically gives you a 140 times multiplier to your critical strike damage, which is insane. And this is a very powerful generic one that can be added to just about any build, including the poison build, because of the Noxious Resonance key passive, which allows you to stack based on critical strike damage. And I think the strongest one at the moment, in terms of damage output, is definitely the Colossal Glyph. The Colossal Glyph is the one that gives you the 2% damage multiplier, and of course I don't have it on this particular character. Of course I don't. Let's just go to any of my other characters, because they're all using it at this point. So the Colossal Glyph gives you the 2% multiplier per stack of Resolve, which is going to be a huge bonus to your damage output in general, and you're definitely going to want to take advantage of this one. You don't really have to take advantage of the effect of the rune. It's really just the 2% bonus per stack of Resolve, and then stacking your Resolve as high as you can get it. It is very easy to stack Resolve, and it's very easy to get more stacks of Resolve through things like the amulet, your helmet, your armor, your pants, etc. And I've been told that one of the strongest builds in the game at the moment that's doing like 200 trillion damage per is actually using basically no uniques, because any unique in these slots would take away from the ability to stack more Resolve. So that's pretty funny. So in summary, absolutely amazing class. Hundreds of ways that you can build this character, if not thousands. There are so many fun combinations of abilities and skills and things that you can do with the way that these attacks work. Just as an example of like one little thing that you can do, Ravager is absolutely amazing because it has this little bonus right here called Measured Ravager, which is while Ravager is active, your core skills instantly dash to your target, and all vigor generation is increased by 30% times. So what does this mean? Well, this means that when you're attacking with a core skill, the core skill gets a free dash as long as you have Ravager active. So if I'm standing, like next to a monster, and I try to attack that monster, like with my core skill, what's going to happen is I'm going to run over to the monster, right? And I'm going to attack it. However, if I have Ravager active, instead of running over to the monster, I'm going to dash to the monster. And there are so many simple things that you can do in this character that can change ultimately how your character behaves and what benefits you're getting. And I absolutely 100% love like theory crafting and building these characters. What I'm working on most recently is an eagle character. I want to play around with things like razor wings, quill volley. I haven't really done much in it. I also want to build like an entire soar character. I think that could be fun as well. And I don't really see a limit to it. I want to do eventually like a Withering Fist basic build. I also want to try out like a basic build with all of the basic skills. There's just so much fun stuff here and interactions between all the skills. Scourge is not to be overlooked either. It is absolutely amazing with the vigor recovery or the healing that it can give you. Counterattack is absolutely not to be ignored with the huge counter critical strike damage bonus that it gives you, including also its very unique interactions with Razor Wings by allowing you to bounce the Razor Wings back at the enemy. Armor Hide is really interesting for not only its Thorns bonus, but also the fact that it can give you maximum resolve at any time. Concussive Stomp can be fired off randomly whenever you freaking block an attack, which is really cool. There's just so much here. And if you're ever interested in trying to theory craft a character, please do just come in the live stream or make a comment on one of the posts. Tell me what you're stuck on and what you're trying to make, and I'll try and give you some advice. I'm more than happy to help out. I know this video is an hour long, but honestly, I just wanted to give you guys as much information as I could on the Spiritborn and what I thought about it in terms of how the characters function and what you can do with it. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me for these fun little videos, even when we just spent an hour talking about frickin' Spiritborn. As always, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button on the way out, and keep watching.